All right, so once we have a few layers of animation, and remember we make a perfect duplicate just by hitting Command J. And all of these shortcuts, are taught to you through Photoshop, and there's certain ones you just learn through repetition. So that's really why I try to get my students just to jump in and be brave. But once you have a perfect copy, then of course you can edit it. And you don't need to always use Puppet Warp, but I'm going to do something really extreme here. And I'm just going to plot some marks. And it's like at the very end, Nico's going to wig out a little bit. Because animation doesn't always need to be slow and arduous. You can do something a little bit more dramatic. So I have 4 frames here of Nico, and I have a stable background, and I have underneath what's called a timeline. And so in the very right-hand upper corner of this timeline window, so it's easy to miss because there's so many features, I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to say Make Frames from Layers. Now remember, Photoshop gives you control of every pixel, but it allows you to separate it onto multiple layers. What the Make Frames from Layers does in this timeline frame view, it allows you to program the eyeballs next to the layers. So on this first frame, I can have the background showing, but I might also want my first Nico pose showing. In the next frame, I'll click on that frame. And I want the background showing. And on this frame, my mouse is being kind of sticky. So I can turn the background on for all of them, or I can hold down Shift, select them all. Let me get it out of that corner. And just turn on the background for all of them. There we go. So now I can go by frame and turn off certain layers. So I'll turn on my second one there. I'll turn on my third one here, turn off my first one. On and on and on. And I can push them in different orders. So here I might turn on this one. Here I might turn on this one. And then I can make new frames with this button that's next to the trash can. And I can just animate with all the existing things I've already done. And let's create just 10 frames in no particular order and kind of see how they work. I'm going to have some pretty dramatic shifts. So once I have 10 frames, I can then hold down Shift, select them all so I don't have to do it individually, and I can set the timing. How long do I want that eyeball to show that frame, that assortment of layers? And I like to usually do about 0.2 seconds. I'll usually do about 0.3 seconds, but we'll just use one of their standards. And then I want it to play through forever. And this is how GIF animations are made. And then I just hit play, and you'll see it animate. So this is like the Nicomon twerk. Now, another thing we cover a lot in digital art, and honestly, it's probably the most valuable thing for students because you can't get it from any other arts class, is understanding digital file formats and basically how they save information and where they're appropriate to use. So to save something like this, you say File Save, and it will save it as a full resolution working file, which is a Photoshop file. So if I say File Save As, you'll see that it says PSD after it, and it's a Photoshop file, and I want it to go to the desktop, and I can save it. But if I want it to play online on my Facebook page, I need to output it as an internet-friendly file type, which is much lower resolution. So I go to File, and I go to, I need to be in Photoshop, and I go to Export, and I go to Save for Web. There are so many different ways now in Photoshop that you can output video. You can output MP4s, you can output movie files, but this is the old legacy classic. That will work on any online format, will even work as a profile icon. And this is what's called a GIF. Now a GIF limits our beautiful millions of colors to 256 colors. And we can customize those and work with them, but its built-in defaults tend to do a pretty good job. And I can play it through and make sure it's working the way I want, and it should match my timing. But you'll notice that the colors are a little grainier. Everything might be a little jittery. And then if I'm ready, I just say save, and it will save it as a GIF to the desktop. Now those two file formats are incredibly different. So while a digital artist is working on something, their file might take up a lot of space. So this is a relatively small file because I made it screen resolution, not print resolution, but it's still around 9 megabytes. So that's 9,000 kilobytes. Well, as a GIF, because it limits the colors so much, this is already basically resized. It's like 9 by 9 inches by 100 pixels per inch. So it's pretty much optimized for web. Whereas for printing, you want at least 300 pixels per inch. So it would be 3 times that, or more than that. But for the GIF, it's already limited in color, and that takes it down all the way to just 2 megabytes. So that would load really quickly. And so all I do to test it is I say open with, and I pick a web browser, and it will play it then right within the web browser. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes they'll be too big, and they'll take forever to load. And I usually recommend, like, do nothing more than 10 by 10 inches and try to keep it at 100 pixels per inch. Standard screen resolution is only 72 pixels per inch. So 100 still allows you to zoom in quite a bit without it looking really distorted. But if I zoom in a ton, you'll see how blurry and soft it gets. Now the reason you need to know that as a digital artist is because from that Photoshop file, I can output it at a lot of different resolutions, a lot of different sizes, customize it for a lot of these purposes. And that's another reason why it's a really good media if you want your work to be really versatile. All right. So that's my little character animation demo. And you don't only need to play with moving a character, you can animate in so many different ways. So you can animate with process photos. That's something I like to do with my work. So even when I work as a traditional painter, I might do something where I animate my process of painting. And I'll just use the digital tools to kind of seam those different frames together. So not just to refine and retouch the photos, but to make them kind of an accurate document. And this is GIF animation, just like making Nico dance. You know, it's just understanding pixels, how to play them at the right frame rate, how to make them the right size for the purpose. So it's a really, really versatile tool. And I've used that same method to make art videos for fine art installations that are projections. You bring them into an editing program, you can put music with them, and they can loop endlessly, and they can be meditative. There's just a lot of different potential you have. So while that's going on, I'll just refer you back. Here's a process animation, like with the Nicomon steps that I showed you early on. And I'll just show the digital coloring. And so this is how most people think of digital art, and it's a great and wonderful thing to be able to do, be able to play with. But once you know those tools and those approaches, it can really branch out to a lot of other applications as well. So all those different professional fields. And when you look at what our class is doing right now, when I've taught drawing and painting, I do 4 or 5 big projects a semester. In digital art, we do 10, because there's just so many different aspects you get to play with. I really want you to get your hands dirty in there. So we're working on digital painting in Digital 1. We're working on final character design, animations, and movement tests in Digital 2. We do what's called logotype design. So we use our vector imaging to actually make logos, and then we actually make logo types, design our own fonts, and then place them with spot illustrations, create backgrounds. And it all starts with just compositing photos together. So I think I have this open, probably already loaded. And what's fun about compositing with other people's pixels is then we can animate with them. So it's really intimidating to start with a blank screen and then have to create everything yourself, though we get there in the end. So we start just by putting other people's pixels together. We create composite landscapes, composite creatures, and then we animate the creatures on the landscape. And then we get into vector imaging and logos. We did a kind of a coat of arms theme this semester. But it all starts with traditional understanding of art. Color theory applies, edge control applies, blending, understanding value. Yep, so that's digital art. I thank you guys for stopping by. If you want to email yourself that PDF, that file's right there, it's right on your desktop. That has those links here, here, and here to those different resources that might be helpful to you. All right.